Blog Talk Radio.
Well, a very good afternoon to you on this lovely sunny day. It's 90-something degrees here in New York City. And as soon as the show is over, I'm going to sit in the yard and tan my white bits, but I'm not going to tell you where they are. I am your host, Xander Gibb, and this is indeed Xandermonium, the talk show that gets you talking. On today's show, my guests are Senator John and Dr. Gina Loudon, stars of Wife Swap, the Tea Party Movement, and the Dr. Gina Show, and many other shows, of which I was a guest recently. How I became friends with these forward thinkers will make you think and probably make you laugh too. All this for your education and enlightenment, more to come in a mere moment. So, as you know, every week we are able to keep up with technology so you can interact with us. You can join in the chat at the bottom of the page. Now, if you're a guest, click on Open an Account. You just need to do that with Facebook. It means you can interact in the chat room and tell people what you think. Or you can call us with questions on 347-884-9061. That's 347-884-9061. Call with questions for myself or Dr. Gina Loudon or Senator John Loudon. And you can also tweet us. My Twitter handle is at XanderGibb, XanderGibb. And you can tweet Dr. Gina Loudon, all lowercase, DrGinaLoudon. That's Dr. Gina Loudon. And Senator John Loudon's Twitter is at John Loudon. That's JohnLoudon. So make sure you stick around to hear this interesting couple and my interview with them. As per usual, at the end of the show, if you have a beef, you can use the last 10 minutes of the show for your section to get off your chest exactly who's pissed you off, who's bothered you. You can call us on 347-884-9061. That's 347-884-9061. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's somebody else. Call us and tell us what you think. Don't forget to check out the Jake Pentland Show, Saturdays, 1 p.m. PST or 4 p.m. EST, with Jake, Den, Eli, and Susie, and all of the crazy cult of Jake peeps. Very interesting discussion on there yesterday about obesity. As usual, I came away with a few points that I was not happy about, but we managed to resolve those. Thank God for civil discourse. Now, don't forget to check out Time Out Seat with Brandy and Jenny. They are, of course, Jake Pentland's sisters and daughters of Roseanne Barr the blocker. I don't know when their show is going to be on, but check their Twitter page for details. That's at Time Out Seat. That's TimeOutSeat. Also, check out the Rob and Trav Show. That's Tuesdays, 8 p.m. EST, 5 p.m. PST on grindhouseradio.com. I'm sure I'll see you there. Also, best to check Rob and Trav on Twitter because I believe they're actually doing it live via their own website, too, which I think is robandtrav.com. But check their Twitter for that information. And last but not least, check out the Dr. Gina Show, weekdays, 10 till 12 PST, 1 p.m. To 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And check Gina's Twitter for the links to that. It's on there every day. Now, just on a separate issue, I see my guests are on hold, so we'll get to them very quickly. I'm actually thinking of leaving Twitter and just using it to plug my show because it's becoming increasingly difficult to have an opinion that differs. And I thought that Twitter was the forum where we kind of said what we thought, said what was in our head. But some days It really doesn't feel that way. But that decision is still on hiatus. Let's see what comes up this week. So my guest today came to my attention when they appeared on Lifetime Television's show Wife Swap. As we have become accustomed to with Lifetime, they edited the episode in order to make John and Gina look like Bible-crazy, gun-toting, gay-hating Republicans, which couldn't be further from the truth. And after the show, I wrongly attacked Gina on Twitter, telling her she may dress like a Christian, but that was where the similarity ended. And once it had been pointed out to me that the issue was about how the show had been edited, and after an apology and a lot of civil discourse, my friendship with John and Gina flourished, even to the point of causing them to fight over who found me first. I am proud to say they have been part of my evolution on a political level. So let me welcome to the show Dr. Gina Loudon and Senator John Loudon. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Senator. What an honor.
No
An
kidding.
honor? Which bit?
Your friendship.
Well,
Starting
yeah,
there.
the honor is reciprocal, believe me. So how warm is it in the SD today, and are you having to use factor 57 out there on the beach?
We were just sitting in church and the breeze was blowing, and I'd say it's probably around 70 degrees right now, but we have it's called June gloom in Southern California, and we are definitely in the midst of that right now.
Well, it's in the 90s in New York. I don't know how it can be hotter here than it is like in the South, like in California. I really don't.
Yeah, San Diego's really funny. They actually have 4 separate weathercasts. Well, one weathercast, 4 separate climates. You have the ocean climate, the inland climate, the desert climate, and the mountain climate. And the weather reporters will give you all 4. And on the ocean right now, it is overcast and sunny, but you drive inland about 10 miles, and you'll be in the desert, and it'll be nearly 100 degrees.
It's kind of like all these different time zones. People message me and say, what time is your show Mountain Time, or what time is your show in Hawaii? And I'm like, I can't work it out, all these differentiations.
Exactly. Right.
Do you guys take full advantage of the beach?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
Every second we can, and we really wanted our whole lives, worked our whole lives, prayed our whole lives that we'd get to be someplace where we could really do fun work and engage the culture and the dialogue that you were just talking about, and that you and I have done a lot of on Twitter, but also someplace where you could have the serenity of the ocean. We just happen to love it. And so so it's no mistake that we're here, and we're really happy, still in the honeymoon period, if you will. Even paying the pretty tax, we're still in the honeymoon period.
I think John was saying you've been there about a year now, is that right?
That's correct.
Right. So where did you live before?
Well, I never know who you're directing the questions to. So we lived before this in Alabama. I was syndicated there in the South and the Midwest on my show, and then before that, we lived in St. Louis, Missouri, where I started in radio, and of course where John served also as a senator in the Missouri Senate.
Right. Oh, just to clarify, either of you can feel free to answer, and if I have a specific question for one of you, I'll kind of say a name. So don't feel, we're not that formal around here, it's just like, just treat it like friends chatting. So you have 5 beautiful children, and the youngest of whom is an adorable young boy with Downs. I mean, how cute is he?
Mm-hmm. Oh, you take that down.
Yeah, Sammy's awesome. And Sammy's actually, we adopted him. He's number 4, and then we had Bo 7 months later. He's number 5. So,
right.
Yeah, they are awesome. And by the way, you ask how we love the beach. We're actually doing church on the beach right now. We are taking full advantage.
Really? So, that sounds amazing.
It's awesome. It's really cool.
What do you do in terms of music? Do people come with guitars and stuff? And
they've got this seaside park, and it's kind of this, the tip of where the starting point for the pier and it's just an awesome little ice cream shop and everything right here. And then they have electrical outlets, and they plug in, and they've got a little rock combo.
Fab.
And yeah, so it's pretty cool. PA system, they're all set. It's very cool.
Sounds like my kind of praise and celebration.
Yeah, it is. It's awesome.
So Gina touched a little bit on the fact that you used to be a senator, and that ended because of. Is that right?
I'm sorry. Say it one more time.
You were when you were a senator, that ended because of term limits. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
How do you feel about term limits? Do you feel that they're necessary, or do you feel that if the senator is doing a good job, that they should be allowed to continue as long as people want them?
I'll say quickly, but I know Gina's got really strong opinions on this. I remain a little bit mixed, and when Missouri, I feel like it's always sort of like looking a gift horse in the mouth. In Missouri, we were like an old style sort of Southern Democrat state that would elect. In Kansas City and St. Louis, they'd send all these lefties, and so the result was you had a Democrat majority with a tremendously left-of-center agenda. And then when term limits came in, these old-time Democrats, when people got a choice, the Democratic Party had moved so far left that they couldn't elect blue dog Democrats or nominate blue dog Democrats. They nominated liberal Democrats in rural Missouri, and Republicans beat them all day long. So term limits resulted in the Republican takeover of Missouri. And so from that standpoint, I thought they had a good effect. The voters really got a more honest look at what people stood for. But it did definitely throw out a lot of talent. And the new politicians are so worried about running for the next thing that they're easily corrupted by the lobbyists and the special interests, because you have to pay. The old-time person who'd been there forever didn't really owe anything to anybody except, just vote how they thought was right, and they could always get reelected. And sometimes they voted wrong and got reelected, but at least they had more cojones, so to speak. They'd stand up, and now we've got people that are a lot more squishy. So I'm kind of mixed on it, to be quite honest.
So you have a different take on term limits to John, Gina?
Oh, I absolutely do. And this is one of those issues when people want to paint me with a broad brush and just say, oh, she's a right-wing hack. They need to understand that I am so open and willing to conversation and dialogue. To me, that's the whole purpose of the way our republic was established. And this is one of those issues where I am a bona fide hypocrite, and I admit it all the time. I worked very hard for term limits, worked very hard. I remember standing out on a blacktop pavement, 103-degree heat, and working really hard to pass it. But then when it was passed, I watched what happened, and this is the thing, Xander. Power doesn't go away. So when you term limit people out, the power transfers. And if the voters are being too lazy to vote out the 30-year incumbent who's been there too long, the voters still own that power under our Constitution to do something about that. If they elect not to do something about that by not voting, that's on the hands of the voters. My problem is that what happens with term limits is that same power that was in the hands of the voters, and they were just choosing not to use it, transferred to the political consultants, the Karl Roves of the world. That, to me, is a tragedy that is much worse than one body or the other, one party or the other having political power. Power being in the hands of people who cannot be unelected is terrifying to me, and that to me is the result of term limits, and I hate it.
Right.
Yeah, and she's absolutely right. I want to say one more point on that. That she's always given me great clarity on stuff, and this is one of them. People ask, what is wrong with this country? What's wrong with the Republican Party? What's wrong with the Democrat? Both parties are corrupt. Well, they're absolutely right. Both parties are corrupt. And the main reason they're corrupt is literally you'll hear these consultants say, I've got to get going now. I've got to create a primary. I'd never heard those words. What do you mean create a primary? Well, he's going to go get himself a client. He is going to recruit a candidate, support a candidate, and the only thing consistent in political life is these consultants that know where the money people are, have access, and then the money people rely on them to tell them what candidate to back. So the only
Right.
politicians that can climb are the ones that pay homage to the special interests and the consultants. And if you're a politician of either party and you try to act independently, the consultants eat you alive. They cut you off. They maybe can't take you out, but they can make sure you never climb.
I think we've made history today because you are probably one of the first Republicans I've ever heard admitting that there is this on both sides, because most Republicans won't kind of concede to that.
Yeah, well, thanks. I try to be outside the box and just be straight with the way I see it.
Right. So
if you Google my name, Xander, and you Google my name with Obama, and then you Google my name with Karl Rove, I promise you'll find much more criticism of Karl Rove than you will Obama. I think Karl Rove is much more responsible for the state of cynicism and voter apathy in this country and corruption than Obama could ever be.
Well, we're making history on this program today, I think. So, John, this is something that particularly interests me, because I'm kind of a little bit ignorant about the processes. Could you now run for senator in San Diego after you've lived there for a certain amount of time, or will that not be possible because you've been a senator elsewhere?
No,
that would not be possible because his wife would leave, but otherwise it might be possible.
Yeah, I don't want to cause any breakups on this show today. I'm guessing it's not the last we've heard from the Loudon family in terms of political office. I think that one of you is going to end up running for POTUS, but I wonder if you can tell us which one that might be.
You think what?
I don't think this is the last we're going to hear of the Loudons in public office. I'm just wondering whether it will be you or John that will be running for POTUS in the future.
Yeah, I vote for Gina.
Yeah, I vote for John. It's definitely not going to be me. I love the media side of politics, Xander. For me, and I don't think you can even have the perspective until you've worked both sides. But I've been on the inside of politics and I've been on the inside of media, and I can tell you that the media is much more fun, and maybe even a little more glamorous. Although people don't think that, but I'll tell you, there's not a lot of glamour in politics past maybe the first 6 months, where you've been to all the parties with all the hobnobbers, and then it's the same hobnobbers, and it's just not all that glamorous anymore. And so there's just a lot of fun on this side of media and getting to expose people, do investigative reports, and tell the truth and bring groups together for dialogue. To me, that is really what could fix our republic. Forget parties for a minute. That's where the real healing begins. And so I love this side of media, and I feel much more effective in media than I ever did on the political side. Although I will say John has an amazing record. He reformed workers' comp in the state of Missouri. He literally closed an abortion clinic by just simply passing a law that forced other states to abide by the Constitution. He did a lot of amazing things. So you can definitely be effective, and I encourage people to run for office. I just don't want to.
No, I don't blame you. It's not something I would want to do, because I am someone, as you know, who is very outspoken on lots of issues, and I think that political office sometimes gags you from saying what you actually feel.
So
yeah,
true.
And that's a great point. People, one of my favorite adages is we don't get the politics we want, we get the government we want, we get the government we deserve. And
absolutely.
And when people complain about all politicians are this and that, you look at them and say, well, you elected them. What are you complaining about? You elected them, and it's like, oh yeah, I guess I did. And when they say, well, politicians are just plastic and they don't really say anything. Well, that's because they get eaten alive the first time they misspeak. They're so afraid. Mitt Romney ran about the most milquetoast campaign I've ever seen in my lifetime, and that's because all his consultants were telling him, well, all you can do, what they tell you is, it's yours to lose. The only way you can lose is by making a mistake. So don't make a mistake. Don't say anything wrong. Don't say anything bold. Don't give anybody anything to grab onto. Don't state any positions too firmly. The other side will shred you on that and spin that. So they really don't say anything. And then we sit around and say, well, politicians, I hate them. They're all the same. They're boring. They don't, well, that's because the first time you see a politician's word taken out of context, like Todd Akin, for instance. This guy was eaten alive, and his statement was taken out of context, and he's gone now. So lesson learned. If you don't think all the other politicians were watching that day and said, "Boy, I'm sure never going to say anything of substance, or I'm going to be taken out of context." So it's so frustrating, but that's the way we live, and the shame of it is, I always kind of come back to, well, we just don't teach any civics in school anymore. People don't, know that if your politician is quoted saying something, you need to take a minute and catch the whole context before you judge. We're so quick to judge. We threaten people, don't judge me, or don't be too quick to judge. Don't judge a book by its cover. Yet we all do it every day in this 24-hour news cycle.
Absolutely, and I am someone who has been guilty of that for a long time, and it was only kind of standing back and taking a good hard look at the country and at the facts at hand that started my political evolution. Because people will tell you, even 2 and 3 years ago, I wouldn't have broken bread with Republicans. My brother-in-law is a Republican, and we used to have such heated fights. But I actually think the media is to blame for a lot of this, because I think they want us to. I think they want both sides to kind of hate one another. They create this subterfuge, and they don't want us to agree. And I'm not exactly sure why it is, but there is a group of people that are coming out, including yourselves and myself, that are maybe have been on different sides of the divide, but we're actually starting to look at the things that we agree upon and build upon that to make America a better place.
Yeah, well,
I think that's a great point, Xander. I just want to say on that don't forget for a moment. I wrote a post this week. It may even already be at my opinion piece in WorldNet Daily. I have a weekly column there. And I was talking about the work of these so-called mental health professionals, of which I guess I'm supposed to be one, although sometimes I don't want to claim it. But anyway, and the way that they say that, we should, the politicians in Washington, D.C. need to get along. Let me tell you something. The politicians in Washington, D.C., they get along. The problem is that they and the media cultivate a spirit of hatred between the grassroots, the people on the ground, the you and the me. They cultivate this whole spirit of hate between us. But let me tell you, they're laughing all the way to the bar after hours where they're sipping whiskey together, because that's the way politics works. And as long as they can keep us from dialoguing, you see, we as a people have less power. So that's why it's so important what you're doing, forging this new ground and communicating with people that you maybe formerly disagree with, maybe still disagree with on some things, but still talking about where do we agree, because when we agree and we have consensus on both sides, guess what? All of a sudden we the people become much more powerful, and the politicians don't want that. Yeah.
We do, and I think that even just I'm going to talk a little bit about in a little while about how a bit more about how we kind of started our dialogue. But I honestly do think, and this is not a conspiracy theory, but I actually think that there is this real movement to keep people from that civil discourse, because I'm sure that some people don't want things to change. Some people want it to stay the same. They want it to always be us and them. Even like when I was on your show and when we talked about stuff and you kind of referred to liberals, I kind of, in my brain, I kind of shuddered a bit at that, because I don't consider myself to be a liberal, but my thinking is more libertarian nowadays than it is Democrat. I would never kind of consider myself a Republican. Not that I think we need the labels, because it's about what's right and wrong at the end of the day, but I think things are definitely shifting, and people are not being told, accepting being told what they should think anymore.
Yeah, completely agreed with everything you said. But the problem is that the one problem with everybody going sort of, thinking, well, we need to remove the labels. We do need to remove the labels, but also at the end of the day, we have to vote. And for better or for worse, this is one of the things I hate that is true, but it is true, and I've studied it in depth. The two-party system is the way it works. So what we have to do then, if we don't like the two parties the way they are, is we have to transform them from within. I don't care what party you're in, but get involved in the party and get involved in the planking of your own platform so that real people have a say in the planks in their own party platforms instead of just the politicians and the media. Yeah.
I mean, John, who do you think the GOP's strongest bet is for 2016? Because I mean, I have my own personal views on who it is, but I think that the problem last time was that the candidate they put forward was not the ideal candidate to be the POTUS.
No. Yeah, no, and you know, this is a very important passion of mine because I tell people there are three things that you need to look for in a presidential candidate. One is he's right on the views, he or she. Two, has the character to actually do what they say they believe in. You know, carry out what they say they believe in. Because if they're right on the views and they're just lying or telling you what you want to hear, then, you know, you don't trust. And that's one of the problems Romney had. It didn't matter what he said he believed in, which was very little, because he didn't espouse, he wasn't very clear with what he believed in. And when he said he had an opinion, he probably had an opposite opinion earlier in life. So, you know, he was so nobody really trusted his character, even if he did express an opinion, that he'd carry it out. And yet we were told he was electable, and we should nominate him as Republicans because he's the most electable. He's got broad-based, moderate appeal. Well, we see how well that worked. It didn't work for him. It didn't work for McCain. It didn't work for Dole. It barely worked for Bush. But that's the problem. So we need somebody with the right issues, character, and the third thing might surprise you, won a statewide office. The candidate must have won statewide office, either a governor or a senator. We really, and the reason is, I don't care how great you are, you cannot run for president if you don't know how to put a campaign together.
You're saying not a community organizer, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Well, but bear in mind, he'd been an Illinois senator by that point.
Right.
So he had won a statewide campaign. And
hey, I have been one of President Obama's biggest supporters for long enough, but that, you know, as you know, that changed. I couldn't any longer deal with not only the lack of transparency, but just the kind of that gets to a point where you can't blame the previous incumbent anymore for failure to make things better.
Yeah, he can answer anything, you know, with any accusation against him can disappear with one of two things. Either it's Bush's fault or you're just playing politics. You know, that's his answer to any accusation. So whether he's guilty of sin or not, it's just politics or it's Bush's fault. So those are his two favorite lines. But that's to get to my point on who, to answer question specifically on who in 16, I am looking at a handful of people. First of all, you are going to get, and you heard it here first, I'm kind of good at handicapping these things. You're going to get Jeb Bush. He's going to be the establishment nominee in 16. And if you're happy with that, good for you. If you're not, then you need to look at a handful of others. No big surprise, Rubio and Rand Paul, I think, are leaders there. Look for John Kasich in Ohio. And I personally, right now, the one I'm more and more impressed with is Ted Cruz out of Texas, for somebody who just says what he believes and isn't afraid in taking firm stands. But at the end of the day, I really like any of the three of them.
What about you, Gina? Who's your money on for the GOP's strongest bet for 2016?
You know, I find this all so interesting. My husband is a genius on these things. He predicted, I'll never forget this, I was speaking to a group of Palin organizers, a huge, big organized group for Palin people right after McCain and Palin had just lost the race the very first time that Obama was elected for president. And on the way there, we were devising my speech. We were driving from Missouri to Chicago, and my husband said, well, we have no choice. It's going to be Romney. It doesn't matter what we think. It's going to be Romney. And I said that in my speech. And then after, of course, Romney was, it was going to be Romney, and Romney would lose to Obama. Those were John's words. And this seemed insane at that point. I can just tell you, it seemed insane to say those words. Just like right now, John's saying it will be Jeb Bush. I'm telling you, the guy is somewhat of a prophet on these things, and it will be Jeb Bush. And so unless not just conservatives, not liberals, just all of us who are freedom-minded and who realize that how our liberties are being trampled right now can agree to a constitutional candidate and get in there now, active and early, we will have Jeb Bush as our nominee on the Republican side. And probably, I don't know, I can tell you this, the next president, if we don't do what I just warned, the next president will not be a lover of liberty who respects our freedom. It will be an establishment candidate on the D side. It'll be an establishment candidate on the right, on the R side, and that is the way things are going to look unless we get engaged right now. And don't you dare go off Twitter, Xander. I'll have your hide. I'll have to come for you.
Okay, then, Gina, I'm going to say. I have to say that my money is on Rand Paul, but I think it's an unfortunate thing that the word Bush leaves a bad taste. The name Bush leaves a bad taste in most Americans' mouths now. And I think that if Jeb Bush had been given the opportunity that the W had, we would have a totally different country now. That's just my personal opinion there.
I don't.
Yeah.
I really don't. I think Bushes are Bushes. They're establishment candidates. They'll always be establishment candidates. You're going to get the same, more of the same from another Bush that you got from the Bushes before. So if you liked it before, good for you. If you don't, you better get to work.
Right. Yeah, and Xander, this is one, you talk about conspiracy theories. Back, 15, 20 years ago, there was a St. Louis talk radio station, a left-of-center talk show, and I'd call into this drive time. The guy was an awesome provocateur, and I remember a handful of people would call in talking about the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, and the guy'd hang up on them like they were kooks. Don't even talk to me about these conspiracies about this Council on Foreign Relations. Well, guess what? Council on Foreign Relations, when the blogosphere and the Twitter sphere took off and social media, they couldn't hide anymore. Now the Council on Foreign Relations has a Wall Street address, and they regularly opine in the media. They have meetings all over the world. And what do? I mean, nobody really knows much about them, what they do, but you know who's a member? George Bush, both Bushes, and Bill Clinton. Yeah, I mean, these guys, these are all buddies hanging out, setting international policy, and they're pulling the levers through the presidency. So they kind of own enough, and this is a club. If you try to go join the Council on Foreign Relations, good luck. So these are the people that are also choosing our Republican nominee. And so if you don't, if you think that's a good thing, then keep voting for Bushes. And again, it's not to say that the Bushes are bad people. It's just where their trust is placed and who they want to impress when they make their decisions. Ronald Reagan was outside of that. Ronald Reagan wanted to impress the American people. He didn't care to impress. He wasn't part of that East Coast club. The Bushes are steeped in that East Coast club, and so is Karl Rove. So that's why when I measure, and you're a kind-hearted person, and it's a good reflection on you that you take a look and say, hey, these are basically good people, and his reputation is soiled. George Bush wasn't a bad guy, but he did a handful of really bad things.
I agree.
And he did them, and it's why he did them. It wasn't just that it was a bad choice. It's that he's part of an establishment that really dictates those things. And that's what we're looking for, people outside of that.
I think that my money kind of for a Republican candidate would be on Rand Paul, but I have to say he needs to get a better haircut. He needs when people are talking more about how you look and how bad your haircut is, they don't get to the fact that your policies might be good. I mean, I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I now consider myself a libertarian, but I would, I am torn between him and Hillary, but I really do like Rand Paul.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, if given that choice, Rand Paul is very far outside the establishment, and one measure of that is And this is interesting. It was a Republican that coined the term military-industrial complex. That was General Dwight Eisenhower that put his finger on it. And let me tell you, that is the Council on Foreign Relations. It is the military-industrial complex. And Bill and Hillary are just as much a part of it as George and Jeb. Right. Both Georges and Jeb. They're all in that same club. Rand Paul, the way he speaks against international intervention makes the military-industrial complex shudder. Now, I actually happen to disagree with Rand Paul on that issue. His dad was, I think, more radical on it than he is. But for my money, I will give up a lot in order to have somebody who's liberated from that establishment, and Rand Paul definitely is that. So I don't know if that made any sense at all, but
I definitely made some. Go on.
But go with Rand Paul and all day long, and I think
that, rather than Hillary, you mean?
Hillary. Yes,
right.
Rather than Hillary. And mainly just for that reason that he's so outside of the establishment, and Hillary is 100% a part of the establishment. Oddly,
right.
The same establishment as George Bush.
Right. I need to just go for a second to the chat room because I've been really neglectful. I've been really engrossed in our conversation. But hi to everyone in the chat room. Hi to Carly. Hi to all the guests. Hi to Joe, Natalie, Rich, Trav. Hi to all of you in the chat room. Joe is talking about some of my comments about Obama. I'm not anti-Obama, Joe. But I feel that I have the right to say what I don't like about his performance as well as what I do. Surely that has to be part of the process, But sorry, we interact a lot with the chat room because they ask questions and they talk, and I've been a little bit neglectful of them today because I've been engrossed in the conversation. So let's talk a little bit about wife swap. We were back to Romney then, as it's really kind of how we became acquainted. Now, for those of you who don't know, John and Gina and their family took part in Wife Swap with a family that couldn't have been more different from their own, and they came under attack from lots of people on social media, including one known talk show host called Xander Gibb, but we'll leave that one for another time, who allowed themselves to be led by the way the show was edited. Now, first of all, let me ask you, what was your initial motivation for being on the show?
Well, for me, Xander, it was, and I was the one who kind of led us down that path, if you will. John's kind of busy working and doing what he does, and I was the one who had talked to the casting directors, and I told them no a few times, and I told other reality shows no a few times. But this particular case, I really had to look in the mirror and ask myself what I was doing to speak in the culture. Because right. I realized that I love this word culture warrior, and that I'd let people label me as a culture warrior. And then I had to ask myself, what real flesh did I have in the game? Or what had I really done to prove right. myself a culture warrior, or even really to engage in the dialogue? And I realized another thing. People in California get frustrated and disenfranchised with politics because they feel like they don't have a lot of influence because California is such a big state, and especially conservatives don't have a lot of voice here and whatever. And so as a mom of 5 people who is really open to dialogue, they even played this part in the Wife Swap. They actually played where I said, I want people to know that there is a different kind of conservative out there. And I felt really strongly about that. So to, on the one hand, call myself a culture warrior and then refuse to engage in the most influential means of having a cultural discussion, that being, of course, primetime television, a reality show, which more people watch by far than they watch the evening news or certainly Fox News. And
Absolutely.
So I thought this was that opportunity. And the biggest reason I didn't want to do it, and you know it, and everybody listening knows it, was a very base, selfish instinct of protection and not wanting to be misportrayed. But I realized at some point that even if we were misportrayed, it would still create that foundational dialogue that I believe is so critical to reclaiming our freedoms. And that's the reason that we did it.
But would you say that the response was that you received was more negative or positive, or was it very mixed?
It was very much more positive, I can say. The experience itself was rather personally upsetting to me, in particular, because the guy really wasn't interested in dialogue. As you could see on the show, he absolutely forbade any discussion of politics or religion in his home, and therefore it made it really difficult to actually have anything to do with any sort of civil discourse that I was hoping for. Right. But so personally, it was very difficult for me. You saw his temper in the show and whatever. So those things were personally difficult. But from a political perspective, the dialogue that ensued was amazing. And the mail I still get to this day from people saying, I thought of running for political office, but I never wanted to because I was afraid that I would, that someone would laugh at me or that someone would misunderstand something I said, but I'm going to now because I watched you stand up under that heat. That, to me, is exactly why I came to the party. And one in particular that's really cool, Xander, we were at a local beach hangout the next night or like a couple of days after the whole thing happened, and there was this woman sitting there with 4 children. I don't know, my husband sparks up conversation with everyone, and so we ended up talking to her, and she said, I just want to tell you, I'm spending, I think it was Easter, alone without my husband. He's overseas fighting in Korea for our country right now, and she said, before I saw you on Wife Swap, I didn't know how I would find the strength, but since I saw you on Wife Swap, I just knew that I could be strong like that too. And I didn't think I looked all that strong in that, but if that was her perception, you go, girl. I was thrilled that had that impact on her. Yeah, so that alone made it all worthwhile, Xander. But still, as I said, the opportunities that have come from it for me to talk about these issues are booming. I mean, literally, it's all I do, and so I'm thrilled about that. That can't be bad. These issues need to come to the forefront. We need to have these discussions, and I think, frankly, I'm really glad that Twitter brought us together to have these discussions.
Me too. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's clear up a couple of things that came out of the show, things that I have kind of talked about with you, but the show kind of portrayed you guys as being anti-gay. You're clearly not, are you?
No. Go
you
ahead,
take that, John, I guess. Well, I was just going to say that I think John was particularly misportrayed in that. I actually felt pretty good about their portrayal of me. I wasn't that upset with the way they portrayed me, but I thought their portrayal of John was extraordinarily unfair. They took what was probably 5 minutes in a discussion that was led and instigated by their producers and used that to make it look as though John were, literally thumping his Bible. But you've got to be able to laugh at yourself, and you've got to be able to laugh at these things. And our friends out there on Twitter and in other social media and on their blogs have defended us endlessly, and we're so thankful for that. The reality is that and what we tried to say is that it doesn't matter what John or Gina Loudon think unless one of us is a lawmaker and we're passing laws. These things have to come through laws. Our personal opinions they literally don't matter because what would have to happen for gay marriage, of course, as you know, to be legalized is that it has to be written into the Constitution, and the definition of marriage has to be completely changed. I personally have a lot of gay friends who don't want that to happen because of private sector free market implications and other implications that John can speak better to. But the reality is that it doesn't matter what I think. I'm just one person. It has to be made into a law, and if you can't find a good way to write that law, then you have to think twice about whether your feelings should be imposed on other people. And, I really love dogs in restaurants, but I don't think that there should be – I am a huge dog person, and I just hate states that outlaw them. But I don't think that there should be a federal law that says that I can bring my dog to restaurants. I think these are things we have to be careful about because changes to our Constitution always, always tread on our liberties. That's where we have to be careful.
And what you saw in my debate was it was so twisted. They kept, and Gina keeps pointing out, I mean, they would ask, okay, now, let's see your Bible. And I joke, it's like.
Is it super close to your hand right now, John? That's what I wanted to know.
yeah. And the other one is, I wasn't born yesterday. Let's say for a second I was anti-gay. Well, am I stupid enough to sit there, bashing gays in front of, a gay producer who's going to get to edit the show? No, I mean, you'd have to be an idiot to actually act the way I was portrayed. What they did.
You're telling me the producer was gay?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Imagine that. A Hollywood producer is gay. But
No,
and actually, they have a number of them. But
I'm never going to watch Lifetime again. Would you be surprised to know that producers of other shows from Lifetime have shared with me that Lifetime actually have an anti-gay agenda?
Oh, no
or that
kidding.
they feel Lifetime has an anti-gay agenda?
Well, in this case, what I did, and truly, being Christian, a lot of people confuse and they have their impressions what it means. It's very simple. It means like Christ. So
right.
That means you try to live like Christ. So I get hate mail from people or texts like, you're not much of a Christian, you're hating gays. Look, I don't hate gays. There are very few people I hate. I kind of hate the guy that produced the thing, but I'm over it. Life's too short to go around hating anybody. So if you ask me a straight up question, am I against gays or do I hate gays? No, I'm not against anybody. I'm against ideas and politics. I hate ideas and people who sometimes the way people push them. But in this case, all I was trying to do is explain to this thick-headed woman the simple platitude that I can love you and not endorse every choice of yours. And in this
Absolutely.
case, it wasn't gay marriage, it was three-way marriage. She wanted to be able to, and I mean, now there are a certain amount of people that think we ought to have gay marriage, and there are certain people who think we ought to have flat-out polygamy, but that's a pretty tiny group. And what she was saying is, if I don't endorse her right to marry this girl, then I hate her. And so anytime you saw me arguing anything, it was hear me. By the way, I put up $500, not $250. I said, I need you to hear this one thing. I can't endorse that decision, but I can still love you. No, you can't. You're just a liar. And she'd cry.
But
wow.
But this is the other thing I want to say about that, Xander. I know a lot of people who strongly believe that we should change our Constitution to include gay marriage, but they do not believe that they don't even want the pro-polygamy people using that same. So this was a really mixed thing that they put us in the middle of, to try and equate gay marriage with polygamy. I have a lot of friends, including my own agent, who's gay and has been together with his partner for many years, and they have children and the whole thing, who take great offense to the idea that polygamy is the same thing as gay marriage. And they were trying to blend the two. Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to say one more thing on your question of the assessment of the whole thing, because I think this is very important. We paid a big personal price. We got smeared and dragged through, and Gina especially had a horrible experience. But when you look at that and you step back and say, we made a friendship with you that we wouldn't have made,
Absolutely.
We met others, and then it's like, how do you compare those two things and say it was bad?
Right. I think when as someone who watched the show, I actually went and watched it again after I'd spoken to Gina at length on Twitter, and I actually was able to. You see, this is the thing. What television tries to do is, like, if your particular issue with a situation is about people being anti-anything, they will try and ring that bell for you to actually make you see things in a certain way. And let's face it, the editing on that show tried to make you guys look a certain way, which was just not the way that you are.
Well, right. In one example, they kept saying, well, aren't you curious, like, what they do? What they do in the bedroom? And I'm like, no, really not. I got a lot of things. I'm really more curious about whether I should invest in gold or, I'm more curious about where this country's going and what they do in their bedroom. Like, well, and I realized, hey, these are people with a job. They're trying to make a show, so if they need me to ask the question to kind of get it out there, then I'll do that for them, because that's the kind of guy I am. I'm trying to be a team player. So I asked the question, You know, and I'm like, well, ask them about this. And I'm like, well, all right. And, you know, shame on me for trying to be nice and ask a question that I really honestly couldn't care less about.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I'm openly gay, but I don't really want to know what you do in your bedroom or anybody else. It seems to me to be a very obscure kind of question to expect people to ask, because it's private, isn't it? You know, what you are and what you do are kind of two different things. So what I'd like, another thing I'd like
I'm obsessing about it. It was, it was crazy.
Sorry?
So anyway, go ahead.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, did you know how they had portrayed you before you refused to do the final table meeting, or was that just because of the whole caboodle of how they treated you?
Actually, we the things that happened behind the scenes on this show are the reasons that we didn't finish the show. It had nothing to do with anything that transpired on the show that you saw, other than perhaps you saw some of the behaviors, some of the antics, and maybe you can make your own deductions by that. But we're contractually bound not to talk about any of that. So unfortunately, I can't even talk to you about that. But I'm sad and disappointed that we didn't get to at least show our reunion. You know, that to me would have been a really nice thing to have gotten to show. And I did. It is taped, and I did offer it to ABC, later, but they chose, not to do anything with it, and that's fine. I mean, it's their thing, and they've got their reasons for whatever they do, and I understand business is business. So, but my point is just that, the reasons that we didn't finish the show had absolutely nothing to do with anything that was in any of the storylines.
Right. Right. So do you feel that do you feel it's made you both more recognizable? Do people come up to yourselves or the kids when you're out shopping, or just out having fun and say, "Aren't you the people from Wife Swap?"
Yeah, a little bit. It makes you a little paranoid because you go places and you see people whispering and you think, oh gosh, I wonder if they're whispering about that. But to be honest with you, I get from more people, oh, I think I've seen you on Fox News. I get that a lot more. And of course, I've been on Fox News a lot more times than I've been on Wife Swap, so that might have something to do with it. But we will get recognized, especially in our hometown, of course, because it was a little bit highlighted in the show, and so we'll get recognized here. But by and large, it's not about being recognized, and I know that's not what you meant with your question, but it's not about being recognized. It's really the things that I take from it are the positive things, and I try to focus on the fact that people will, come up to me and ask me a question. I don't like when they come up and accuse me, which really hasn't happened, other than, anonymous people on the Internet are so brave, aren't they?
Yeah, like that Xander Gibb. I mean, he's terrible.
But people will walk right up to me and say, tell me your side because I saw you and I'm just so confused, and I love that question because inevitably we end up friends. And that really is honestly the only way that we are going to take back our liberties. And I love how liberty-minded so many people are these days from the left and the right. And I really think that it's that sort of conversation that can change the entire premise of politics for the next election and really make it so that the next person is elected by the grassroots instead of by the establishment, which is really my goal in doing the whole show, honestly.
So how long has the Dr. Gina show been airing?
I guess it's been about 3.5 years now. We've gone through some changes, and we're getting ready to go through some more big changes that are very exciting that I can't talk about just quite yet.
No exclusives for us then, Gina.
Pardon? No exclusive. You know what? We can maybe do one. We can maybe arrange one, but I am not at liberty quite yet. It's one of those things where nothing's quite signed yet, but discussions are definitely ensuing, and I have a big meeting on Tuesday. I'll just tell you that.
Wow.
So
John, do you ever appear on the Dr. Gina show?
Sorry, say it again?
Do you ever appear on the Dr. Gina show?
I don't think that I have. I have in the past, but I don't think I have here recently. So
yeah, I don't think he has since we launched in California with the webcast and everything. He used to stand in for me and not co-host, but sub in for me sometimes when I was on vacation or whatever. But that was more back in Missouri in the old days, like in the first year, not so much in the last 2 years.
I noticed that you guys say Missouri and not Missouri.
Missouri, not Missouri. Yes.
Yeah. Like, because when people talk about the place that they're not from there, they always say Missouri rather than Missouri.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a joke in Missouri that if you want to run for office, you have to learn to say your Missouras because it's something about certain parts of the state that like to be called Missouri by their politicians, as if that makes them local when it really doesn't. But no, we're from the part of the state that is pretty citified, if you will, St. Louis, a little more eastern attitude, and Missouri definitely. No one ever calls it Missouri; they'd be laughed at.
So tell me, how did producer Bieber come into the picture? Was he on your show when you were in Missouri, or did you find him or meet him in San Diego?
Yes, I actually met him in St. Louis, and actually he had a sister with a special need that had just passed away, and he was very broken about that when I met him, and John had met him at a political event. He was a big fan of John's, and when I interviewed John, met him first. I met Xander first, though, so I've got that claim.
You always argue about who met who first, don't you?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And anyway, he was very, very connected to my Samuel with special needs immediately, and has become just really special in his life. And he misses his sister a lot, and I think Samuel has helped heal some of that. And I think that certainly having him in Samuel's life has been a blessing as well. So, I hired him back in St. Louis, took him to Alabama, and brought him to California. So he's when you find a good producer, you have to hang on to him because they're few and far between, sad to say.
Hey, I would love to find a good producer. I do it all myself here. I do all the copy. I write all the stuff for the show. I host it. I call screen, you name it, I do it. I'm even making coffee in the other room while we speak. So I could do with a producer or an intern, so if you know anyone that's available in the area,
Flip
let me know.
Way. All right.
People are asking in the chat room, Gina, tell them about your show, when it's on. They want to know how they can listen to your show. I know you go out every single day. You go out 5 days a week, don't you?
Yes, 5 days a week, 10 to 12 Pacific, 12 to 2 Central, and, of course, 1 to 3 Eastern. And, every single day, and we talk about all kinds of things. We do a battle of the sexes section, which I think is particularly fun. We talk a lot about technology. I am fascinated with technology and just love to bring the latest news and think about how that's going to affect other things political. And we'll definitely be following this presidential primary as it begins to unfold and hoping that your listeners and mine will take a very active role. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. If you're engaged, I respect that, and I think that's awesome.
Absolutely. I want to ask you about a few more, some kind of more serious issues now to do with politics. When I was on your show, one of my friends who's a libertarian, you know her actually, Alicia. She is the call screener on Fingers Malloy's show.
Yeah,
is it Fingers
absolutely.
Malloy?
Fingers Malloy, sure.
Yeah. She was saying to me, she said, "Oh, I heard you on the Dr. Gina show." She said you were very good. She said, "But I feel that Gina was very easy on you. I would have been a lot harder." So let me ask you a couple of questions, both of you. Would you guys say that you're more libertarian than Republican, or are you Republicans?
Yeah, go ahead, Annie.
I was just going to say, for me, I like to call myself a constitutional conservative.
Right.
That's if you're going to force me into a label corner, Xander, that's where I'm going. Go ahead, Sean.
It's not so much I'm forcing you. I'm kind of interested to know about your thought process about these things. Not that I'm asking you to stick yourself in a box, but sorry, John.
No,
go on.
I understand. I was teasing you. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, well, Reagan said famously, it's like a law of physics that when government expands, liberty is reduced. And in fact, I just tweeted that out, the exact quote today. And that So from that standpoint, I guess you could call me more libertarian. But I get a little nervous about the libertarian term because I think the average libertarian really has trouble defining the difference between libertarianism and anarchy. We really, libertarians kind of like to say they hate all laws and don't want any laws at all. But, there are complexities in lawmaking. Like California just said, you have a right to have your dog at work. Well, so the California law says you have a right to bring your dog. That means that the employer just lost the right not to have a dog at work. So, what if your dog pees on the carpet, Well, that person's got a right to have their dog at work, so the employer lost a right. So, those things get dicey. When you're in the lawmaking process, as I spent 14 years doing, you learn it. Like every law has an unintended consequence. And so your right to smoke pot might mean that your employer doesn't have a right not to have somebody under the influence at the workplace. And so those kind of things, they all change. So I do take, from that standpoint, I guess you could call me a Republican, but I do like Gina's point that it's a constitutional any constitutional adherence is really, in constitutional conservative, conservative gets a bad rap, but conservative just means to conserve. It's preservationist or wise use people and environmental policy. You kind of like, America is the greatest country on earth, and we have just maximum freedom, and sadly, we're being beaten by countries in South America that are that are looking more like we used to look 20 years ago, and because our government has grown so big and so intrusive. So I know that's a long way to answer your question, but I kind of want to conserve how things used to be, how they used to be, and I desperately want very, very limited government. I want them doing far less than they're doing, and I'm very alarmed that for the first time ever, more kids from 18 to 24, the huge Obama voting bloc thinks that socialism is preferable to capitalism, and they don't realize that socialism is absolutely the necessary step on the way to communism and totalitarian government, because socialism just means more government. That's all it means.
Well, I think socialism is another kind of mass label that is put on certain things that most people don't actually really understand.
Well, you're exactly right, and it does. That's why I try to nutshell things for people. It's more government. Socialism, just simply in a nutshell, it's more government. You just think government should be doing more, and if government does more, liberty becomes less.
So you touched a little bit. You mentioned marijuana a little while ago in the analogy that you gave. Are you for or against the use of recreational marijuana? Let's ask Gina first of all.
Yeah, go ahead. You take that one.
Yeah, this, honestly, Xander, to me is one of those issues that is way too talked about and so irrelevant in the world right now. I think most people who want access to pot, all I have to do is walk down Venice Beach, and I can pretty much tell that there's no problem going on. When we have literally people dying overseas, when we have government agencies, targeting individual groups, when we have, people in the name of women's rights twisting the heads off of full-term babies. I don't care, honestly. I don't care. That's my answer.
Yeah,
John, what about you?
I will put it this way. The number one funder to make pot legal is George Soros. And George Soros makes his money destroying. George Soros doesn't build things, he destroys things. He bets against economies. He made his first billion, as they say, almost breaking the Bank of England. So what he does is he sets up something to fail, and then he cooks his investment so that he can buy it for pennies on the dollar after it's failed. And he destroys. And people with that much money, you have to scratch your head and say, what do they want? Well, they want more. They want more money, more power. And why do you think George Soros wants us all smoking dope? He wants us all
get more money from us all smoking dope. I'm not anti. I would openly admit, in the past, not for at least 15 years, I've used marijuana recreationally, but I think that people who use marijuana are far less likely to go out and commit a crime than say, for instance, someone who's drunk or high on drugs. But I think that's kind of another kind of a branch of the theory, really. I want to ask you about guns because you guys are for the right to bear arms. I want to ask you a little bit about how you feel about the Obama administration recommending more rigorous background checks in light of the Newtown shooting. How does that make you feel? Do you think there needs to be stricter gun control? Is it just a smokescreen for something else that we should be talking about? Let's start with you, John.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, well, and, Gina's, we're both hugely passionate. I look at it like this. You kind of get into the libertarian question. Our founding fathers established some liberties they locked in stone. They locked in stone our right to keep and bear arms, our right to free press, our right to, no search and seizure or, unlawful invasion of our house, quartering soldiers, etc. They locked in those liberties. They didn't lock in our liberty to use substances to, distort our mind. So when people confuse, I see these people that are really excited about legalizing pot and aren't fully developed on how important the right to bear arms is. The right to bear arms is, there's an arrogance that says, well, we can restrict those things because our government would never do that. Our government would never turn against its people. Well, guess what? The Obama administration government is the most scariest in our lifetimes in terms of taking all the steps that totalitarian dictatorships take. He wants drones spying on us. He wants wiretaps like crazy. He's spying on the press. I mean, this guy is more intrusive into our lives. They're buying up all the bullets. He's the biggest arms purchaser in the history of the world, all the bullets and everything he's buying up. Why does the Health and Human Services, Homeland Security have to own 500 million rounds of ammunition? I mean, what they are stockpiling is truly alarming. And so the more they stockpile, the more average citizens need to be stockpiling because it starts to look really scary. And anybody who says it can't happen here needs to go read the book by that name.
I think there's a level of lunacy with the thinking in this on both sides. I really do, but I kind of see both sides of it. Gina.
Hello. Sorry, Xander, I've muted myself so that I wasn't interfering while he was talking.
No problem.
So on the gun thing, and this is the other thing that I think John didn't mention. He mentioned the danger of tyranny, which is the ultimate reason why we do have the right to bear arms. And I think it's critical. And if you don't have, everybody says that, you don't have a constitution unless you have the teeth and the power to protect it. Our only power as the citizenry to protect our rights is our guns. And you look at any civilization through history, the first thing they did was disarm them. No matter what the weapon was, the first thing they did was disarm them. And after they take away that Second Amendment, don't worry, they'll be right behind it to take away the First Amendment and all of the others. And so this is my point, though, on a personal level. I am, as I said on Wife Swap, I am a 5'1" tiny female in comparison to the 300-pound thug who might decide he'd like to have something I have when I'm getting out of my car in a dark parking lot at night, which I end up doing often. The only thing standing between me and that thug is my gun. And if he has a gun, I'm still on equal footing with him, even as a 5'1" female. It is my only chance. So while I'll say that I don't think that everybody has to have a gun just because we have the Second Amendment, and I don't think that every woman, certainly I know a lot of women, I empathize with the fact that women in particular, for whatever reason, we're just kind of uncomfortable with them in our gut, and I respect that. But don't take away my right to be sitting across the restaurant from you when the guy comes in and starts shooting, and I can be the one that saves your children. Don't take away that right from me, because I am trained and I do know how to use my gun. So that's my thinking on that. It's an equalizer.
I see that, and I think my I want to say opposition, but it's not really opposition. My issue with guns is that they scare me, and I think if I knew how to use them, I would probably be less scared of them. But I want to take this on a little bit as regards the gun issue. In the Constitution it says about the right to bear arms, but when that was written, the most lethal weapon was a musket. Do you kind of think that the Constitution is set in stone, or do you think it was actually created to be a working document? Because let's face it, it's over 200 years old.
Go, John.
Yeah, this is a hard point, but I need to be clear on it. It's really both. It is a hard fixed document with a specific process to change it. And Gina's got a piece coming out in WorldNet Daily actually today that explains it's supposed to be hard to change laws, and it's certain. And let me tell you, when every year in Missouri there are 1,000 bills filed, on average, 1,000, 200 lawmakers filing 1,000 bills between them, 1,000 new laws they want to lay on you, and so what our Constitution did, people need to understand. The whole Constitution is built on what's called negative rights. And that means you have maximum liberty, and the right you have is for government not to do things to you. So negative always sounds, negative, but negative rights means you're right from. And so the right to bear arms means you are free from the federal government taking away your rights. And so you start with, the government has to make a really good argument to ban you from something and to take something away from you. And it ought to be hard for the government to take something from you. So there's some new toy, new invention, new gun. The government shouldn't, they have to make a really good argument to take it away from you. And so we have a process. We have courts. All those laws start, Congress shall make no law infringing the Second Amendment. And so if the courts have said, you know what, people don't get to own nuclear weapons. They don't get to own bazookas. There are rocket propelled. So we have a process in law to restrict people owning everything, but we shouldn't be able to say, well, the weapon looks scary. There's this awesome video. Sean Hannity did a YouTube. It's probably up on YouTube, where he interviewed this expert riflewoman, this young gal, and I'm now following her on Twitter, and I forget her name. She was like a marksman champion, and she fired 4 guns, and one was an AK-47, and it was so laughable because the AK-47 has the smallest bullet of everything she fired, and it has a larger magazine, does it? And it was really it was an interesting demonstration that we're fearing. We call it an assault weapon and describe scary scenarios. We've all seen movies where the bad guys are running around with AK-47, and so we have images that don't match reality.
I see that, but why do I totally uphold Gina's right to have a gun for personal safety, but if Gina said, I want to keep an assault rifle in the back of my car that holds, you need one bullet to kill someone. Why do you need a whole magazine? Why do you need to come with a whole magazine of bullets? That's one of my bugbears, if you like.
Yeah, well, and the one answer, there's this beautiful scene that's real. I don't even know if it's beautiful. It's actually kind of chilling. I believe the movie was Grand Canyon, and the guy's car is broken down in a bad neighborhood, and Danny Glover's the tow truck operator, helping him, and there's this thug with a gun, and he's like, the kid explains to Glover, you wouldn't give me respect if I didn't have this gun, and it's the fact that he had that gun, and in the scene you're kind of chilled that, wow, these young city gangsters run around, they've got guns because that's how they get respect. Well, you know what? if the people don't have guns, they have no respect from their government. And that's how I'd answer that question. It's a reality that if we did not have the right to defend ourselves, we've heard it said, foreign countries, we have these bills or have these documents come out years after they were written or stated. Foreign governments know you don't ever want to try to take on a war with the United States because they'll be shooting at you from behind every tree. And so we are free, and nobody even thinks of trying to take us over because they know we're armed. And if we're not armed, if we don't have high-capacity magazines, I'm glad my neighbors have them. I don't have a gun with a high-capacity magazine, but I know a lot of people who do, and it helps me sleep better at night.
Okay, well, the beauty of this show and the beauty of our relationship is that we don't have to agree on everything, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to hate you for not agreeing with me.
That's absolutely right, and I think that's really this kind of conversation is what is really important, because even with gun issues, Xander, my guess is that we agree on probably more than we disagree on. These are the finer points that. Yeah, that politicians and media like to exacerbate and exaggerate to try and convince us that we shouldn't have dialogue, but we should.
But if they keep us divided, Gina, we're not seeing the underhand things that are going on, the liberties they're taking away from us, like the things to do with the Internet, et cetera, et cetera. We don't see that if we're fighting amongst ourselves. Let me just give the number. If anyone wants to call in with a question for Gina or John, you can call us on 347-884-9061. That's 347-884-9061 if you have a question for Dr. Gina Loudon or Senator John Loudon. Am I right to refer to you still as Senator John Loudon? Like when a president is no longer a president, they still refer to them as like President Bush or whatever.
Yeah, last office held. It's always the last office held. Yep.
Right. And that's actually kind of funny. Usually I get called Senator when I'm bad.
That's at home.
I love it.
That's at home. When he says something wrong, the kids will be like, Senator, or if I'm mad at him, I'll be like, Senator. Yeah.
That's hilarious. So I want to talk now for a little bit about another hotbed issue. I know you both have very strong views on abortion, and until recently so did I. And I must say I was always very pro-choice. However, seeing the atrocities going on in some of these clinics around Gosnell and the clinic in Texas, with the things, I actually wish in a way I'd not. You saw those videos too, and in a way I wish I'd not seen those videos because they disturbed me, and it left me very torn. And I'm always looking for middle ground on issues that I don't agree on, but I can't find middle ground within myself for this. Now, I know it doesn't affect me because I'm not a woman. I'm never going to be in the position to need to have an abortion. But my the pro-choice side of my brain is fighting now with the pro-life side of my brain.
Well, this issue, honestly, is very comparable, I think, from an emotional standpoint anyway, from, a lot of things that you've encountered in your life, probably because of the things that, the ways that maybe life has been for you in your particular situation. So I think that we can all voice our opinion on abortion. I don't think this is exclusively a women's issue.
Right.
And I think it's really unfair for women to say that. A lot of little baby men have been aborted, and so they didn't get any say. And I think as that happens, a lot of men today should be able to speak on that. Not only that, whether you ever choose to be or not, you're capable of being a father, and men's rights have been trampled in the abortion industry. And let's not forget, this is a $1 million a day taxpayer-funded industry to the tune of $9 billion a year, Xander. This is about money, and that's what should make us all really sick in this. There has been no check and balances on these abortion clinics because it is a $9 billion a year industry, and nobody wants it. They're going to turn their heads the other way. This is disgusting. Right. And this is the thing. I wrote a post last week for WorldNet Daily about this, and I call it the American psychosis. We love to think we're so different.
I read it, actually.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, we love to think we're so different from just pre-Nazi Germany. But really, how different are we when we have turned our heads the other direction while Gosnell sniffed the backs of full-term, born-alive babies, and when the very next couple of weeks, another doctor came along, and his last name is Karpen, Karpen, out of Texas.
Right.
And he, instead of bothering to do the invasive snip that Gosnell was doing, he just simply twisted the heads off of babies. One of the women who worked for him, 3 of them actually, testified that he twisted the heads off of many full-term babies every day in his clinic, and yet this barely made a blip on conservative talk radio, Xander. What has happened to the American conscience? You and I can debate all day long about whether a 2-day-old fetus is the same thing as a 7-month-old baby. But let's not forget, this goes back to what you and I talked about initially with the whole gay marriage issue. There has to be a law. The law simply has to say, when does life begin? And that is the question that I can't get any pro-choicer ever to answer. And the other thing is this, Xander, where are, you know, in Westboro Baptist, you know who those folks are, the ones who say horrible things and go to funerals of our troops and say awful things and haunt their families and all this. Okay, well, when that happens,
in the name of freedom of speech.
Yeah, and they called themselves Baptists. Well, the first thing that the Baptists did was come out in droves disavowing, these people are not us. We want to say that these are the bad example. We are the good example. These people are not us. We don't represent them. They don't represent us. Where are the Planned Parenthood protesters of this atrocity? Where are they? Where are the people standing out there with their signs saying, this is not who we are? Let's not forget for one moment, Xander, that Planned Parenthood was founded by Margaret Sanger, who is a known eugenicist, whose goal was to eliminate the black race. The moment we let go of that is the moment that we have slipped into the same numbness that they were in pre-Nazi Germany, and we can't call ourselves any better until we come to face these realities.
Right. Can I just go to the chat room for a second before we come to you, John? Because some people are kind of having a bit of debate in the chat room. Basically, Joe said it's just one asshole that did that. But this is the unfortunate thing, Joe. Don't know how many people are doing that. We're only finding out this because these atrocities are coming to light. I never said I was pro-life or pro-choice. I said that I was torn. I just wanted to clarify that for the chat room. But if this is going on in 2 places, I doubt that it's not going on in other abortion clinics.
Well, let me go right to the business there on that point. Both parties have their extremes and they have their special interests, and in the Democratic Party, it's very acute, very clear. There is a very strict hierarchy. You've got organized labor that wants to build the pipeline. What is the pipeline down from Canada? Blanking on the name of it. 20,000 union jobs, making like almost 100,000 a year. It's huge money for organized labor. They want it huge, and they can't get it because the environmental left is much higher in the Democratic hierarchy.
It's the Keystone Pipeline.
Power. The highest power in the Democratic hierarchy is pro-choice. They are so powerful, and here's one, and let me just back that up. The governor chose as the Director of Health and Human Services Kathleen Sebelius. What did Kathleen do before being tapped for that job of dictating health care for the country, having the most control? She will carry out Obamacare. She was the governor with no particular distinction except that George, nicknamed the Killer Tiller, was the most infamous abortion doctor in the country. People came from all over the country to get their late-term abortions from George Killer. Now, conservative Kansas was very embarrassed, many were, to have that distinction of harboring Tiller. They could never get Tiller. They all knew he was breaking the law, and here's how he's breaking the law. You had to have a medical necessity to have a late-term abortion. So what he would do is he would get another doctor's second opinion. Well, how do you get the other doctor's second opinion? Well, it's got to be a neutral doctor. Well, he was getting other doctors on the take that would give the second opinion. Everybody knew this racket was going on, and Kathleen Sebelius insulated him. He was one of her very top donors, something over $20,000. She lied about getting the contributions,
and became Secretary of Health and Human Services anyway. That's how important she had people that insisted that she be the one tapped to have that power, and of course Obama put her there. And so it's not just one jerk in New York or another one in Texas.
Right.
This is part of the Democratic Party establishment. And I wanted to say I became pro-life. I came to this view in a constitutional law class. Had nothing to do with religion. A girl was assaulted and lost her baby, and they were prosecuting the estranged boyfriend for murder. And I went to the law professor, and I said, well, I'm really having trouble writing a paper on Roe v. Wade because the law clearly says this, and yet if the woman wanted to abort the baby, it's not a life. But if somebody else aborts the baby without her consent, so to speak, then it is a life. It's either a life or it's not a life. It either gets constitutional protections or it doesn't. This is very inconsistent. And so that is the point at which I thought, well, I guess I'm pro-life then, because I think that law, the first thing law should do is protect the most vulnerable. And if we start compromising on protecting the vulnerable, there's no place to stop it. We don't protect our elderly. We don't protect the infirm otherwise, or the mentally vulnerable. Government should protect everybody. And as soon as we start carving out exceptions to the law of protecting people in the basic question of life, then we all better hope that we're the biggest, strongest people that with enough power to maintain that will always be protected.
But regardless of what your views are on legal abortion, you can't term what these people, Gosnell and Carpenter, you can't term what they were doing anything else but murder, because those babies would have been viable outside of the womb. And to snap a baby's neck, I mean, I'm sorry to go into detail, but that's what they did. A baby that was viable outside of the womb, that is nothing short of murder, in my book.
Certainly, no argument here.
Okay, well, let's. I want to move on a bit because time is catching up to us, and I want to cover a couple more things, and then I want to play a little game with you guys before you go. Don't worry, it's nothing you need to be concerned about. It's not the usual game we play. I want it to be respectful, but it will be quite funny. I want to talk a little bit about the Tea Party because, Gina, you're credited as being one of the founder members of the Tea Party. Do you think the media ever gave the Tea Party a real chance?
I don't think that the Tea Party needs to be given any special chance. I think that the Tea Party, for me anyway, and I can only speak for myself, has always been about holding the political establishment accountable and giving them a check. Prior to the Tea Party, you would never have heard of any opposition to Karl Rove and his policies. You would never have heard terms used like liberty and freedom the way they are today because of the so-called Tea Party. I don't really care what you want to call it, but I think that those within their own parties need to hold those parties accountable to their platforms and be active all the time in pursuing their own values within the realm of that party. And what's happened is that the rational part of the Democrat Party, in my opinion, the John Kennedys, for example, of the Democrat Party, are forever extinct because the very leftist socialist agenda has run roughshod over their values and have taken over their politics regardless of what their planks and their platforms say. Now, the Republican Party, same thing, same exact thing. We have a platform that says this, and yet we have politicians who want to go do things that they have absolutely no authority to do based upon the platform of the Republican Party. So it is up to individuals within both of those parties to hold their own establishment or their own leadership accountable. And that's the reason I got involved. For me, it was about building accountability within the ranks of the party that I most identify with. And I would hope that everyone would take that same stand. So I don't need to be given any special consideration by the media to make my stand. I feel like I get to do that every single day on shows just like yours, and I think it's a great thing.
I have a little bit, not a disagreement, but a slightly different take. The Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street is kind of like offhand, a Democrat-leaning alternative. Both of them were saying, you know what, we've got to do this. We've got to hold the establishment accountable. And the establishment that runs the Republican Party has great similarities with the establishment that runs the Republican Party. Those same special interests run it. And if you think, you go to any Tea Party rally and you will hear one thing: debt. Stop the debt. And if you're a crazy person because you think that you object to the government laying too much debt on your kids and you're fed up that the Republican Party isn't doing enough to stop the debt, well, then I guess we're all insane. And that was the single rallying cry of the Tea Party anywhere in the country. Gina looked and said, wow, the Republicans did TARP. That was a corrupt corporate bailout. And now Obama's doing his stimulus that makes TARP look tiny. He's taking it and making it even worse. Both parties are saddling my 5 children with debt that they'll never be able to repay. Who the hell are we to be the first generation in the history of the country that said we're happy to go on a spending spree, put it all on a credit card, and leave our kids with the bill? That was the. But
you should know, John, it's do as I say, not as I do. That's the theme for leadership in this country. It's do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, but all the different ways that the establishment press spun it, all the images that they created, these lies that the Tea Partiers in D.C. spit on a black congressman, it was disproven, it never happened. There was a concerted smear campaign that was, by the way, not just the left press, the Republican press. The only place that the Tea Party, as you kind of put it, got fair play was Fox News, and that wasn't even as good as it could have been. But they did at least let the Tea Party people speak and gave them a regular platform to say, look, this is just about the debt. This is not. There's nothing else. And what was so fun about being involved with the Tea Party is you had people who were libertarians, who were Ron Paulites, who were, anarchists. And you had all these people that they knew they weren't really comfortable with either party, and they now had a place where they could go and meet like-minded people who were fed up and just wanted this country to not go into more debt and maybe, by the way, kind of honor some other limited government principles, and they could all visit without having a label slapped on them like, Republican. And so that was really a cool, fun thing. It was sort of like a conservative Woodstock, if you will, to go to these Tea Party events and meet people who shared those basic values of less debt and, less government. So
Absolutely.
It's fun to be involved.
I have a question from the chat room for you, Gina, from Travis. He's a host of a show on Grindhouse Radio called The Robin Trav Show. He said, if I could ask you if you really have tea parties with, like, stuffed animals, crumpets, and all that stuff.
What?
Question is, if you really have tea parties with stuffed animals and crumpets and stuff.
And crumpets.
I'm sure he's joking, but I thought it was quite funny.
That is funny, and as the mother of 2 daughters, I can assure you that at every opportunity I do love to go have tea with my daughters, but it's a different kind of thing.
I love that too. I have a niece who every time I go over to the house, she wants to have a tea party with Uncle Xander, which is really funny. Her father is the guy who's a Republican, so we both have a good laugh about that when she says, "Let's have a tea party, Uncle Xander." Let me ask you, Gina. And you don't have to answer this, but are there some people, some prominent Tea Party people that you feel that their behavior has maybe done more harm than good for the Tea Party? I don't expect you to name anybody unless you want to.
if you're talking about politicians, I wish the question was a little more specific. Because, of course, I mean, when you have a movement of millions of people, I'm sure there are people that do more harm than good. And certainly, the passion of even some of the Tea Partiers honestly cracks me up from time to time when you go to these events and you're speaking and, somebody will stand up and start yelling at me because I'm not conservative and not for, and I really, but that's kind of the quotient you walk into when you have these Tea Parties, people from all different sorts of personalities and political persuasions and passions.
Right.
But that's also what makes America great. If you're asking specifically, though, about politicians, I guess I try to give great deference to the way people play out their own passion and their own politics and their own personal experience. And I try not to think that I always know the best way or that my way is necessarily the right way. I will say, though, for those who are unwilling to listen to the other side, I don't care if you're on the left or the right, if you're not willing to listen, to stop and listen, and if all you read is your own echo chamber of media, and if all the talk radio you listen to is your own echo chamber, just don't talk to me because you have no authority whatsoever. And that goes for those who only tune into Fox News or those who only watch MSNBC. And I just think when we subscribe unilaterally to a philosophy, so much so that we only re-indoctrinate ourselves rather than trying to listen and learn, we do a great disservice. So for those people in the Tea Party, I would have a problem with that.
We are so in tune, and I kind of really like that, and I love that. I always love to be proven wrong by someone who says they're a Republican, but they can actually listen to what I have to say, whether they agree with me or not. I'm always happy when that happens. Let me give you an example. I have through the years, and again, you don't have to comment on this if you don't want to, but I have really tried to separate Sarah Palin's politics from some of the things that she does. But I've just found that so hard to do. Like, for instance, when she went full out to support Chick-fil-A over the anti-gay stuff. You see, I agree. Any business can do whatever they want to do, but the effect that has on that business is then it's their own responsibility. But when people go out of their way to support causes that are negative, I take real umbrage with that.
And I'm not sure I got your question in there. I heard you. I'm just not sure I got your question.
I don't think it was so much. I don't think it was so much a question as more of a statement. I just mean that I am someone that tries to see the good in everybody and tries to see everyone's point of view. But I've just never been able to click on any level with Palin. It was more a statement than a question. And you don't have to comment or agree or disagree. I mean, I don't know if she's someone someone that's your friend or,
Well, hey, let me say something on that. I think I understand what you're suggesting, but one thing that I want to caution you and really everybody to, one thing that the Tea Party people have done pretty heavily is studied Saul Alinsky and his tactics. And this is a leftist who, wrote the book Rules for Radicals. And one of the things, so Tea Party people are very sensitive to those tactics. And one of the tactics is to call someone from the herd and make an example of them. So it is a very carefully orchestrated tactic to destroy one, make an example of or destroy one so that you can change the behavior of all. And so the Tea Partiers do tend to circle the wagons if they see someone being attacked. So when Arizona got attacked for taking their stand on illegal immigration, they had a lot of local state problems that none of the other 49 states can understand, and they were trying to deal with them. And they were attacked mercilessly as some state with a bunch of knuckle-dragging racists. Well, you don't know what it's like to be in Arizona. You don't know what their problems are. And yet the country was like boycotting Arizona. And so we moved to help Arizona. Hey, So we did a boycott of Arizona to support Arizona, and so when you saw Chick-fil-A get attacked, it looked like an Alinsky thing that now so they've been targeted and they're going to be singled out for destruction. And I think that's what Sarah Palin was what you're probably getting at, and that's probably where she was coming from. It was, hey, we kind of need to, if somebody's being attacked, then maybe we ought to defend them, because if it's kind of like going back to that old what is it, Bonhoeffer, who wrote that if they came for the infirm and I wasn't infirm, so I didn't care, and they came for the Jews and I wasn't Jewish, so if you see somebody being attacked and you think it's unfair, watch it. And there is a meanness in this country, and we see people get attacked, and we've been victims of it. But going back to your Tea Party question about people to look out for, people been destructive, there is absolutely a establishment infiltration into the Tea Party, and you will see, and I don't want to name names, but I predicted it. A lot of us were afraid that this was going to happen, but you'll see these pretty prominent Tea Party people suddenly backing full-on establishment political candidates, and it was pretty shocking just how brazen it was. And so, in that point, it left a lot of cynicism. There's a lot of division. You'll see Tea Parties have splits over things like that. And our rule in St. Louis, for instance, was always the Tea Party doesn't endorse candidates because, and I really pushed hard to make that a part of it for that very reason. Once you start endorsing candidates, you're going to start dividing yourselves. You need to lay out a set of positions and let the candidates endorse your positions. And if they say, hey, I agree with the Tea Party, well, good. Then Tea Party members can support them. But if they're ignoring the Tea Party, or they're hostile to the views of the Tea Party, and who's going to be hostile to less debt? So now that I live in California, I've actually found politicians who are hostile to less debt. They all out here seem to want more debt and be proud of it. But we've got a $60 billion train to nowhere, literally, and can't balance our books. So, congressional hearings on it. That's how crazy it is out here. But, yes, there are definitely Tea Party people who've been very destructive, and that's been pretty sad to see. But luckily, that is the minority.
Thankfully.
Yes.
All right, let's talk about. We're kind of coming towards the end now, but a couple more things I want to talk to you about. I want to talk religion. I know you're both Christians. Which branch of Christianity do you belong to?
That's actually a funny question. I think Tina's on mute. You maybe want to.
I'm a Jew for Jesus, so I'm really interested in where you're coming from. I guess more I'm asking what kind of church you go to.
Well, we go to a church because we have a great affinity for the pastor of that church. His name is Jim Garlow, and Jim Garlow is the one that started the real movement. It's a bipartisan, non-denominational movement that says that our First Amendment rights don't end in the pulpit, and he's absolutely right about this. And he stared down the barrel of the IRS and said, "Come and get me, because I am going to talk about politics from the pulpit because it is my legal right, my constitutional right to do so. And if you don't believe me, then come audit me." And of course the IRS doesn't, because they know that if they try to do anything like that, first of all, it's going to end up in the Supreme Court and they're going to lose, because it is our First Amendment right. If anybody knows the history on this matter, it's the Black Robe Regimen who used to lead the charge on all issues political, and it was all kinds of churches. Liberal, conservative, didn't matter, just churches, because they were the moral foundation of the culture, and our founders understood that, and so that's why they built that into our First Amendment. And that all ended in the 1950s with the Johnson Amendment, because they started threatening, the IRS started threatening these churches and saying there's a separation of church and state. You can't talk about politics in churches. It's absolutely untrue and untried in the courts, and that's the reason why these churches are saying, all right, come and get us. And so anyway, so I just love his politics, and that is the reason why we are going currently to a Methodist church, but probably in our hearts I would say we're both Reformed Presbyterians.
Right. Well, I actually thought the separation of church and state was something totally different. I didn't think that it encompassed any ministers or religion not talking about political things, because if you're a citizen of the United States and you happen to be a minister of religion, you can't be muted on your political beliefs, surely.
Right, you would think not, but the IRS has repeatedly used this as an intimidation factor for pastors who are talking about any sort of moral issues that tread on the lines of the political, and even keeping them from talking about issues, candidates, elections, things like this. So we know now that the IRS, I mean, this is not a conspiracy theory anymore, as it used to be labeled. We know now that the IRS does target groups. I wrote a piece last week talking about how many gay families are trying to adopt, and adoptive families are at about a rate of about 70% chance you're going to be audited if you adopted, at least in the year 2012. And
Tea Party members, too, I'm led to believe.
Well, Tea Party members, Jewish groups, there have been all sorts of targeting going on. Basically, if you're going to cross the administration, you might be the next one targeted. And so
I was going to ask if you've been audited yet, Gina and John.
I'm waiting. But anyway, on the issue of the separation of church and state, John can explain it better than I, because he really is more of a historian than I am. But I'll just say that people need to understand that the separation of church and state was never about church imposing its beliefs on the state. It was about the state imposing its beliefs on the churches. Freedom from a state-instituted religion is all that ever was. It was not about individual voices of churches playing in the political arena. And John, I know you can say that better than I did.
Yeah, and actually it was an observation, not a prescription. It was Jefferson coining the terms that we have a separation of church and state, not that we should separate church and state. And that's not to say church and state should be intermingled, but the First Amendment, you read the words, again, Congress shall make no law establishing a religion. So it's a negative right that all churches should have no intervention from the government. Churches should be free, and Congress shall make no law. So the idea that a church could be restricted by the government under the argument of separation of church and state, or people should be banned in some way from expressing their religious views by Congress, is absolutely offensive to what the Constitution clearly says. Congress should stay out of religion. It doesn't say religion should stay out of government.
No,
fact,
and I kind of agree with that, but there is a school of thought that said, sorry, I interrupted you. Go on.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Almost half the signers of the Declaration of Independence of the Constitutional Convention were pastors. They all knew they didn't want government weighing into them, but they were writing the government. They sure didn't want to say that pastors shouldn't have any involvement in the government. So there just is a lot of confusion about what those words actually, what that concept actually means. You know, government is an expression of our collective morality. It's where we write what we agree, whether from speed limits or, my daughter, my 13-year-old daughter was very frustrated because the cop pulled her over and said she should have a bicycle helmet. What business is it of theirs? She asked me. I'm like, that's my girl. and I said, well, honey, the government thinks that you're not old enough to make the decision, and so in this state they want you to have your helmet, and so that's the laws. But that's not Congress. That's the collective expression of our morality in California. They also think in California that motorcycles ought to be able to drive motorcycle riders ought to be able to ride on the interstate and completely ignore the lines. So you're in rush hour traffic with stopped cars and these motorcycles are zipping in and out. Well, you know why they did that? It's clearly not safe. But they said, well, the lives of motorcycle riders is less important than the environment. So motorcycles, we want people to ride motorcycles because they pollute less than cars. So that is a moral decision, government choosing morality. And so, environmentalists should have no more privilege to express their morality through the laws than Christians. And so
absolutely.
That's my take on that. That's all
I want to go back to
all I have to say about that.
Sorry?
Sorry, I'm just hearing Forrest Gump.
I want to go back to something
I have to say about that.
Right. Life is just a box of chocolates. I want to go back to something that Gina said. Gina talked about Pastor Jim Garlow. I actually heard him on an episode of your show, Gina, and it was just after the wife shop. I keep saying wife shop, but that's really Freudian. Wife swap. Let's go to the wife shop. I heard Pastor Jim Garlow on your show discussing wife swap, and I heard him talking about gay people in such non-judgmental terms, and I was really heartened about it. Have you found a church that actually doesn't judge, or is this just the way this guy is?
Well, it's interesting. He absolutely preaches what the Bible says about all things, but not with his own implementation of bias to the best he can prevent it. He hosts, in fact, I think this weekend, if I'm not mistaken, he hosts at our, it didn't go to our church this year. It was there last year, sorry. Anyway, a forum where some of the leading most articulate people in the country on both sides of this issue, on all sides, I should say, because there are many sides to this issue. It's not just are you pro-gay marriage or are you pro? There are people that do believe that gay people should not even have the right to be together. So there are all kinds of angles on this. But he had all angles presented, all the best minds in the country, as each of those groups would have deemed so. And so he really does enjoy the dialogue as well. I think we have to take a really careful look at how we're labeling things. I think labeling has become a really dangerous habit in this country.
Absolutely.
John mentioned earlier, if I don't condone every single thing you believe, then I hate you. That's the most ridiculous assertion ever. And as long as we continue to let people group us and label us, whether you're gay or straight, male or female, pro-life, pro-choice, as long as we continue to let folks label us, it makes us very easy to group, and it makes us very easy to target. And we should have learned this by what just transpired with, of course, the IRS and the AP and all that. So it's happened in the DOJ, and it's happened with the EPA, and more evidence all the time that these government entities are targeting groups because of labels. We have to be very careful about this. And again, I'm addressing this today. I don't even know if it's up yet, but in my Monday column in World Net Daily, I'm addressing this exact topic of labeling and grouping. Extraordinarily dangerous, and watch for this to be the next battlefront, really, this grouping and this labeling.
And it also causes divide, but I think that's it's not an unconscious thing that's trying to be done here. The divide, I'm sorry, my brain went. The need to cause divide is a conscious thing, and that's why people put these labels on people and situations and groups, because it helps to cause divide.
Well, it helps to cause divide, and it helps to target. I mean, first they cause the division, they separate us. Always watch in a politician's mouth. If their speech consists of constant division, this is about women, this is about poor people, this is about Republicans, this is about Democrats, they're lying. When they start that, they're lying, because they're not giving any deference to the individuality, which is the grassroots of America. I mean, we are all about this individual perspective, and that's what politicians should be speaking to, and that's what Reagan did so well that I get so offended with politicians today who just want to group us all and label us.
Me too. So, Gina, let's talk addiction. I have on good authority that you have issues around addiction with at least two things.
Oh, no.
Bacon and Vine. Care to elaborate?
And Vine. Yes. Well, social media in general, I would say, would be a pretty safe assumption, but bacon most definitely. I love it. I crave it all the time. It makes every food divine. I mean, you think about it. Bacon is the one thing you can put in name something that bacon isn't good in. You can't do it. It's good in salad. It's good in ice cream. It's good in
custard.
Vegetables. It's good on meat. There is no place that but bacon is the multicultural food of the century. Let's just leave it at that.
I love bacon.
And don't forget
like turkey bacon?
The law. Congress shall make no law infringing the right to bacon.
Right, we've got 6 minutes left. Let's play this game very quickly. It's called Who Tweeted What? And what I'm going to do is I'm only including tweets from 4 people, and they're all people that you both know. So the answer, we're gonna go from one to the other. The answer is either John, Gina, Leda, as in your daughter. Did I pronounce that right?
Oh, Lida.
Oh, Lida. Oh gosh.
Or Jason, as in producer Beaver. So we're gonna start with you, Gina. So I'm going to read the tweet to you. They're all very short tweets because we're short on time, and you need to answer either yourself, John, Leda, or Jason. So this is the first tweet. This is for you, Gina. Healthy beer guts don't count for pudgy.
Healthy beer guts don't count for pudgy?
Yeah, who was that? Was that you, John, Leda, or Jason?
That has to be John.
Correct. John, political correctness on crack.
Gina.
Correct. Gina, the debt ceiling was raised again. Who knew?
Producer Bieber.
Correct. John, so I guess this is what I will become eventually.
Lida?
Correct. Gina,
right.
Another ridiculous statement from Madame.
And I can't be my own answer, can I?
No.
Okay, so it would have to be John.
No, incorrect.
Oh, I missed
it was
one.
Jason. It was. I'm sure John has said it, but in this instance, it was Jason. Okay, John.
Okay.
Surely I didn't really say that on air. Surely.
Well, Gina'd be the easy, obvious answer for that. But
it was.
I'm guessing Jason. It was Gina.
It was Gina.
Okay.
All right, Gina. It took me just 30 minutes to figure out how to do a hangout, but I did figure it out. Thanks.
Lida.
Nope, incorrect. It was Jason.
Oh.
All right, John, I experimentally put walnuts in my coffee this morning, and it was actually kind of cool. I feel weird for admitting that now.
That sounds like Lida.
Correct. All right, Gina. 1 minute you're just skipping through the flowery field of life, and then suddenly life hits you in the face with a huge tractor. Who was it? Correct. John, I just got new sunglasses.
Gina.
Correct.
All
Gina.
Right.
Gina, the New York folks are getting a lesson in the Constitutional Bill of Rights and the Bible.
That would be Jason.
Correct. Okay, John, popcorn is not just for breakfast anymore.
That sounds like Lida.
Nope. Incorrect.
Oh.
It was Gina.
All
right, Gina. What? It was you. It was one of your tweets. All right, Gina, this one's for you. Just because jihadists from all points of the globe will access it, ?
Can you say that one more time?
Just because jihadists from all points of the globe will access it.
John.
Correct. Gina, John even, sorry. Is there a 12-step for me?
That That sounds like Lida again.
No, it was Gina in reference to bacon addiction. All right, last question. Last one. Let's make this the last one for Gina. Babies, it's got to be a sick, sunny, a silly, surreal summer.
Lida.
Correct. And that is the end of our Who Said What on Twitter game, and I think it was a draw.
I think John won, but that was the funnest game ever. Thank you so much for that.
That's awesome.
Well,
that really is.
We're on the last minute of the show, but I've had a fabulous time. I could talk all day, but we've got like 30 seconds left. I'd like to thank Dr. Gina Loudon and Senator John Loudon for their time this afternoon. I've had a fabulous time. I do hope you will come and join us again to put the world to rights. Thank you for this afternoon. Check out Dr. Gina's show. Follow them on Twitter. I'll tweet their links out. So much. Have a great day, and goodbye.
Thank you, Xander. Thank you so much.
Xander.
It was awesome. Enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.